Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This is Jason Zale, staff to the State Government and Tribal Relations Committee. Substitute House Bill 1156 has two parts to it. First is ranked choice voting, and the second is cost recovery under the Washington Voting Rights Act. So for part one, ranked choice voting, under current law, with one exception, state law actually does not dictate how the canvassing boards or the Secretary of State determine which candidate is certified as the winner after a general election. In practice, however, all jurisdictions use plurality voting, where the most votes win. Ranked choice voting is a different method of voting in which voters may rank multiple candidates in order of preference. For single winner elections, the voters' first choice votes are tabulated, and then the candidate who has the lowest number of votes is eliminated. After that, the votes for that candidate are then transferred to the next candidate that was ranked on those ballots, and then the votes are retallied, and the process will continue until one candidate has the threshold necessary to be declared the winner. This bill permits the use of ranked choice voting in elections for offices in counties, cities, towns, school districts, fire districts, and port districts. An eligible jurisdiction that chooses to adopt ranked choice voting doesn't have to use it for every office in their elections. The bill also establishes certain requirements for the ranked choice voting ballot design and vote tabulation, such as the number of candidates that someone can rank and how the votes over the maximum are counted, things like that. The bill allows jurisdictions that use ranked choice voting to hold a top 5 primary, or they may eliminate the primary altogether. Jurisdictions using ranked choice voting can choose whether to deal with positions on a multi-member board, whether they want them to be separate offices or to use ranked choice voting to determine just who's elected to the board directly. And the bill also creates a ranked choice voting work group that will aid the Secretary of State in adopting rules for the elections. The second part of the bill concerns cost recovery under the Washington Voting Rights Act. So a political subdivision violates the Washington Voting Rights Act when its elections are polarized, and there's a significant risk that members of a protected class don't have the opportunity to elect candidates of choice because of vote dilution or abridgment. So how the process works is a voter first may notify the political subdivision that they have intent to challenge the electoral system for violating the act, and the notice must describe the alleged violation and a possible remedy. The person who brought the notice and the political subdivision must work together to implement a remedy. Then a political subdivision can take corrective action to change its election system to remedy a potential violation of the act. If they do so, they must then obtain a court order certifying that the remedy complies with the Voting Rights Act and was prompted by a plausible violation. A lawsuit may be filed only if the political subdivision does not take corrective action within 90 days. This bill adds a cost recovery provision to the notice process. So once a person files a notice alleging a violation, and then if the subdivision adopts a remedy that takes the notice into account and a court issues an order certifying the remedy, then the person or persons who submitted the notice may make a demand to the political subdivision for reimbursement of the cost that they incurred in conducting the research necessary to send the notice. That demand must be received within 30 days, and it must include financial documentation, and the demand must be paid within 60 days up to $30,000. There is a third part to the bill that, subject to appropriation, gives the Secretary of State the ability to provide grants to local governments to implement ranked choice voting or to make changes in response to a notice filed under the Washington Voting Rights Act. And I will turn it over to Linda to talk about the fiscal.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Linda Morell, staff to this committee. There is a fiscal note for the House bill for the Secretary of State in your EBB. A fiscal note for the substitute has been requested, but it is not yet available. A local government fiscal note is also not yet available, but it has been requested. With respect to the Office of the Secretary of the State, they expect that they will need 2 FTEs, one to develop expertise in ranked choice voting, and to be a point of contact for internal and external stakeholders, rulemaking, and outreach. Another FTE would be for reviewing, certifying, analyzing, and auditing ranked choice voting systems. In addition to the 2 FTEs, there would be 1/2 of an FTE for training stakeholders, which includes election workers. And the training will cover tabulation and uploading procedures and updating training materials. The cost for these FTEs, if they're needed in the 21-23 biennium, would be approximately $500,000 general fund state. The need for FTEs would likely be affected by the timing of when local jurisdictions adopt ranked choice voting. The next part of the fiscal impact would be the required voter education and outreach. It is unknown how many jurisdictions will adopt ranked choice voting. For purposes of public outreach and education, the Secretary of State assumes a cost range of $75,000 to $100,000 per county to use print, radio, television, and social media platforms, and also costs for the outreach in translated languages. The example in the fiscal note assumes 50% of the counties would adopt ranked choice voting in the 21-23 biennium. With those assumptions, the cost of education and outreach would approximately be $2 million over the biennium. However, if fewer jurisdictions adopted ranked choice voting, such as 10% of the counties, those costs would be closer to $400,000 for the biennium. Even though the provisions of the bill would be in effect in the 21-23 biennium, the Secretary of State has until July 1, 2023 to adopt rules regarding ranked choice voting. And those rules are to be adopted in consultation with the work group established under the bill that Jason referred to. If local jurisdictions wait until the rulemaking is complete, it may not be until fiscal year 24 that jurisdictions adopt ranked choice voting, and voter outreach education costs would not be incurred in the 21-23 biennium. That would also affect the FTE costs in the 21-23 biennium. There's also an estimated ongoing cost of $6,000 per year for an additional page in the state voters pamphlet. This cost may change depending upon the size of the pamphlet in a given year. There are also other indeterminate costs. A significant factor to the total election costs would be the number of jurisdictions that choose not to hold a primary that's permitted in the bill, and that would affect the reimbursement costs and the distribution of costs among local jurisdictions affected. Lastly, Section 20 of the substitute allows for grants to county auditors and local governments to adopt ranked choice voting and to make changes to its electoral systems as a remedy for a claim filed under the Washington Voting Rights Act. These grants are subject to amounts appropriated. The underlying House bill also allowed grants for local jurisdictions to allow them to move odd year elections to even years. However, in the substitute, that provision was removed. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our analysts, Ms. Morell or Mr. Zolli? I see no questions. Thank you both very much for your briefing. Representative Bergquist, will you take us through public testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we have 8 people signed up to testify. I think I see 6 so far. I'll just call everybody up and we'll go from there. Jay Jennings, Sharon Hannock, Amy Gleixner, Linda Brewster, Timothy Kitchen, Kelsey Bressman, Andre Stackhouse, and Jillian Andriatola. And if Jay Jennings is in the room, if he'd like to start.
Thank you, Rep. Bergquist. Good evening.
Jay, you can go ahead and start when you're ready.
There we go. Sorry about that. Good evening, Chair Armsby and members of the committee. I'm Jay Jennings, Legislative Director for Secretary of State Kim Wyman. Our serious concerns cannot be conveyed in the time allotted, so I'll just try to give you a flavor. As suggested in the original fiscal note, this proposal may be quite expensive. Exactly how expensive, based on the persistent complexity with an unhealthy dose of uncertainty, it's anyone's guess, and no amount of money may alleviate our concerns or reassure skeptical voters. Strictly from an election perspective, the real cost is in diminished voter confidence, a currency more valuable than dollars. House Bill 1156 encourages entirely new methods to be adopted in an unknown number of jurisdictions, from school board members, city council members, port districts, and the like. And these are unpredictably spread throughout the state, sometimes in overlapping counties. It encourages 3 new voting and tabulation methods, which could vary among districts. Those are instant runoff, ranked choice, and a single transferable vote method, directing auditors to simulate a series of elections. There are 1,086 eligible jurisdictions, so the number of possible permutations seems nearly infinite. Considering the potential number of variations, you may share our concern regarding voter confusion. As proposed, and each of the governing bodies and jurisdictions could choose a new and slightly different method for casting ballots and a new and slightly different algorithm to determine the outcome of the election. And all of this is to be presented on one ballot. As we have seen recently, our democracy is fragile, and the risks and costs associated with this proposal are difficult to overestimate, and therefore we regretfully and strongly must oppose House Bill 1156.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaron, go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sharon Hannick, and I'm a voter from the Bonnie Lake area of Pierce County who experienced 2 years of ranked choice voting. I was also an observer at that time in the elections and gained knowledge of the procedures that process ranked choice voting. The cost burden was extremely expensive for the Pierce County, the county itself, as well as for the residents who had to fill out the 2 ballots and pay, those that mailed it in paid extra postage on it. Your fiscal note estimates the up to 8.2 million for the Secretary of State, and it completely leaves out any costs and estimate of costs for the counties. There are costs of acquiring new machines. Currently, I don't believe any of the machines in the counties are prepared for ranked choice voting. They will have to upgrade or buy new machines. Cost to print, cost to mail, staffing costs went to 24-hour shifts. So there's increased labor costs. If you have an audit, it's going to be increased labor costs because they will have to manually count, not machine count the ballots. The fiscal notes for a previous ranked choice voting bill from a few years ago addressed the needs of the counties, and they said it could be anywhere from up to 17.1 to $34.5 million for the county to process ranked choice voting. And that's from a fiscal note of another bill.
Could you summarize,
Ranked
Ms.
choice voting
Hannick?
bill. Pardon?
Could we summarize, please?
And so it could be up to $42.7 million. And the voter education you just mentioned was $2 million. Anything that costs $2 million to teach a voter how to vote, that must be something that's going to be difficult and not as easy as presented by some folks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hannick. Rep. Berquist?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't see Amy, so we'll go to Linda.
Hello.
Hi, folks. I'm speaking to ask you to support the local options bill for ranked choice voting. I can't speak about the expensiveness of it. I'm going to leave that in your hands. I would feel so much better represented as a voter if I could express my preferences in order of their importance to me. For example, it is not that complicated. If the choices I'm given are grilled cheese or hot dog, but I really want a hamburger, I'm not going to really feel like my vote matters to me because I'm not going to get my hamburger. And at least if I'm stuck with a hot dog or a grilled cheese, I'll know that I have had the chance to express my views about my preferences. So rather than being forced to choose what sometimes feels like the lesser of two evils, I could give voice to my priorities. I could better represent my concerns using this method. And voters feeling more engaged is priceless. It's always a good thing. It'll increase voter turnout and decrease voter cynicism. Ranked choice voting means that winning candidates have the obligation to reach the 50% plus one threshold, rather than when there are multiple candidates for a position currently, someone may win with a mere 19% of the voters supporting them. This hardly is representative. The ranked choice voting has been shown to decrease negative campaigning by candidates. That would be wonderful for us all and for our democracy. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Brewster. Representative Berquist?
Mr. Chair, that grilled cheese sounded really good. The majority of the other would like at least 3 if you could send him his way. Sorry. Timothy Kitchen, please.
Hi, my name is Timothy Kitchen. I'm here in support of the local options ranked choice voting bill. I think the issue here is pretty simple. When you go to the store, I'm going to use another food example. When you go to the store and you want chocolate ice cream, but they don't have it, you probably purchase your second favorite ice cream instead. Our present voting system does not allow for second choices. Why is that? In the home of the free, the land of liberty, why can't we have more than one choice in our most sacred and important act? Thanks. Why can't our preferences be accounted for? Why do we have more options buying ice cream at the grocery store than we do in deciding who writes the laws of our society? Ranked choice voting allows for our preferences and second choices to be accounted for. Moreover, this bill simply gives the option for local jurisdictions to use ranked choice if they want to. It does not require anything. A pillar of our country and indeed a fundamental human right is freedom, the ability to choose our own way. Please allow yourselves and your fellow citizens the right that is fundamentally ours. Please support this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kelsey, please.
It's Braceman. Hi, I'm Kelsey Braceman from the 36th District. I am testifying in favor of passing this bill and giving Washingtonians the right to vote in local elections in a way that represents their values. I have waited on this Zoom call for 5 hours as a private citizen to tell you that ranked choice voting is necessary for the restoration of citizen trust in democracy, which I believe to be the value at issue here, which is not as easily solved as other issues that are being brought up, like old voting machines and designing ballots comprehensively. During our last presidential election, many of you likely heard the idea that if you didn't like either of the candidates, you were, quote, throwing your vote away, which leads us to the idea that voting your conscience is something ridiculous. Now that's an idea and I'd really like you to sit with for a second. Under our current system, it is considered hopelessly naive to use your conscience when exercising one of your primary civic duties. Having and using personal values is subsumed by this no-win game, which is played at all levels of government. As a voter, instead of voting to represent your stances on issues, our current system requires folks to engage in guessing games, redirecting critical conversations about issues and policy to endless discussion of who or what is, quote, electable. Do you feel manipulated? Because I do. With ranked choice voting, we have a chance to let citizens vote in ways that represent their true values and stances. You can list your actual preferences instead of picking between two people you would not like to see hold office or, quote, throwing away your vote. This is critical to a restoration of trust in what is now a very beaten down America. Washington has a chance to lead the way. Please support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't see Jillian, so I think our last speaker on this is Andre.
Thank you.
Hello, and thank you.
Hello.
Hello, and thank you for this opportunity to give testimony on SHB 1156, the Local Options Bill. My name is Andre Stackhouse, and I'm a voter in the 36th Legislative District. I'd like to start by clarifying that I may have registered as con on this bill by accident. I'm actually 100% pro this bill, and my statement will reflect that. Tomorrow is my 30th birthday. I was born in 1991, and in that time, there have been 7 presidential elections. And of those 7 presidential elections, 3, nearly half, gave the presidency to a candidate who failed to get a majority vote. The last time that happened was in 2016, and that president's term ended with a deadly assault on the US Capitol building. On January 19th, CNN published an article titled, "America Almost Lost Our Democracy." My only clarification is to say that we almost lost what little democracy we have. The Local Options Bill is a pro-democracy reform. It will bring more kinds of people into our political process, give voters more choices, allow voters to more precisely express their preferences, reduce negative campaigning, and build greater consensus and support for our government. This is the House Appropriations Committee, which, as I understand it, is in general concerned with costs. And while all evidence is that the Local Options Bill could cost less by eliminating the need for expensive primaries and runoff elections, the other cost that I insist be included in this conversation is the cost of ignoring our crisis of democracy. We're living in scary, uncertain times. If we don't strengthen our democracy, we'll lose it, and I urge you to support this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and happy nearly birthday. Representative Berquist, how are we doing?
I think that's everyone, unless did I call Timothy Kitchen? I thought I did, but.
Yes, I believe we heard from Mr. Kitchen.
Yep.
We think that concludes the public testimony, unless there's someone waiting to testify about Substitute House Bill 1156 that we haven't gotten to. Okay, that will conclude the public testimony and the public hearing on substitute House Bill 1156.